Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about Season 2, Episode 6 of Apple TV's Severance, entitled Attila. The title here, it refers to a joke made during dinner by Bert and Fields. That sounded like one name. Bert and Fields. They said they started off referring to one another as hun, like short for honey, like, hey, can you give me that hun? But now, over time, it's devolved into Attila. So from Hun, as in short for honey, into Attila, as in short for Attila the Hun, one of the most well-known barbarians and invaders in all of history who ran roughshod over Europe, mostly Rome, during the middle of the 5th century. Point is, not exactly a term of endearment. The point is that they were cool, and now it's a little contentious between the two of them. But I think this episode title is largely using the Attila the Hun reference to make a larger statement about love as a whole. We see a pretty unique dynamic at play during the dinner between Irving, Bert, and Fields, and I'll get into that later, but for them, their love has evolved in a lot of ways over the course of 20 or so years. Then, everyone this episode has something of an escalation in their love lives. And you have to remember, for all intents and purposes, these people are like teenagers, right? Like the duration of their time working at Lumen is how long they've existed, referring to the innies, that is. And this episode took love, something that's already complicated when you're not a severed adult, and used this severance concept to create an entirely unique love dynamic between severed people or between severed and unsevered people. And I touched on it a bit last week with the idea of Dylan fucking his Audi's wife. And apparently Ben Stiller and I were on the same wavelength, just like Mark's brain after flooding his chip. Dylan, who prior to this season didn't even have a love life, seems to be starting a fresh and exciting new relationship with his own wife. Then you have Mark, who in addition to having his innie and his Audi essentially merging, or now it seems like they have completed the merge, has now had unprotected sex with both Helena and Helly R, while under the assumption that his Audi's wife is still alive. Like, it's a lot to wrap your head around. And I, for one, am very grateful that this show is able to introduce such a wild concept like Severance, as in like the idea of severance, and produce such a unique and creative relationship dynamic among all of these characters. Like, it's really difficult to do something new in TV and film regarding relationships, and this show is proof. Like, it needed to have two entirely independent personalities to bring something new to the world of romance. So, on that note, that's how I'm going to look back on yet another great episode of Severance by examining how this episode advanced the love lives of each of the main characters. Hey everybody, I just want to take a small break from this review to talk about the various other ways you can engage with me on other platforms. If you're so inclined, and I understand why you wouldn't, I am an acquired taste, but you can join the Patreon where you can get extra content like retro reviews, where I review old shows and movies to see if they still hold up today, Mike's Musings, where I talk about shows I'm watching that I don't cover on the channel, or Mike's VOD, where you can commission me to watch a show, which I will then review on the channel. And if you want to engage with me and chat with me more directly, I also implore you to join the Discord and follow the Facebook page. I set up channels in the Discord for all of us to discuss the shows I'm reviewing on the channel, and I also drop new videos in there, so this is the easiest platform for me to share to from my phone. The Facebook can be really fun because I sort of live comment on shows I'm watching, often while under the influence, I'm not going to lie. And I'll also share news there, both about television and film, and about myself as well. So if you like my content, you want to be more engaged, you think I'm charming, or you simply want to show support, feel free to sign up for the Patreon or join the Discord or Facebook today. Links to all platforms are in every video description. Remember to share all my shit to your respective social media platforms. And now back to this review. But before I get into that, I want to start with Milkshake. There's a duality going on with him that I appreciate, since he's not severed. He's not severed, and he's the one with the duality. On one hand, he has drank the Lumen Kool-Aid. Like, he wants to be the best Milkshake he can be, bring all the innies to the yard. And I love the scene of him taking the criticism about using too many big words and like taking that criticism to heart. And he's practicing like dumbing down his speech in the mirror. And that then slowly evolves into him just saying the word grow. And you come to realize he's no longer practicing brevity. He's giving himself like a pep talk, like, you be better. You know, he took that fucking shitty performance review. He took that to heart, and he's chiding himself over it. At the same time, though, he's conflicted about his place in Lumen, I think, like, as it pertains to being black. Like, he works so hard, and he's such a believer, and he wants to be respected. But I think he started to come to the understanding that, like, just like in the non-severed world outside of Lumen, no matter how hard you work or how good you are at your job, being black in a white-collar business world is still going to get you some blackface paintings and being told that you speak wrong. So it's the same shit. And for what it's worth, I personally liked Eradicate Childish Folly, but I mean, whatever. Grow, whatever. It's fine. Other than increasing tension between him and Miss Huang, that's pretty much all we get from Milkshake this week. So now I want to move on to talking about Mark and Helly. Like I said earlier, their relationship has become exponentially more complicated. Like, let's quickly go over real quick where they were at heading into this episode. So they kissed at the end of last season. But when Helly came back this season, it wasn't Helly, it was Helena pretending to be Helly. Mark had sex with Helena thinking it was Helly, and she was pretending to be Helly. And now the actual Helly that Mark fell for returned last week. But he was angry about the deception and questioned whether or not this was actually Helly. This week, after Milkshake's last week's very intimidating, did you tell Helly you fucked her Audi at the Ortbo? Just think about, like, a show that has a line like that in the script, and it makes perfect sense. Like, okay. But after that scene, Mark does indeed decide to tell Helly that he fucked her Audi at the Ortbo in hilarious fashion by saying that they shared vessels. But once Helly realizes what that means, she's quite unhappy to hear about it, just as I predicted that she would. Then, just as I also should have predicted, she's so upset about it that she has to take her shoes off and sit down. And like, why do white folks hate having shoes on so much? Like, why do you need to feel the ground with your feet? And like, I know you probably be like, oh, she just had on heels. Nah, like, I don't know a single black person clamoring to walk around outside with nothing on their feet. But white folks be out here like Fred Flintstone with fucking nothing on their feet, or some fucking, begrudgingly, some fucking dirty ass flip-flops. Like, why was that a coping mechanism for her? Like, oh, I'm so distraught. Let me de-shoe so I can figure this shit out. and it worked. Like, after she took her shoes off to think, she's like, you know, I don't want to hear about Helena's memory of getting fingered by you. I want to know what that feels like on my own. So now that Mark's body has had sex with Helena's body twice, and again, you know there ain't no condoms on the severed floor, it seems like a foregone conclusion that Helly's going to end up being pregnant, adding yet another interesting dynamic to a world in which severing exists. So it's already pretty interesting. Who's the daddy? Is it Mark or is it Mark? like, how do you raise a baby with a motherfucker that only exists in a basement between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m.? It's like so many interesting questions this raises. Like, can Helena really argue if Audi Mark says it ain't his baby? Audi Mark didn't fuck her. Like, so in that scenario, the Mark that she has access to ain't claiming the baby, and the one that wants the baby ceases to exist when the one who doesn't returns. Like, I love it, man. This show's all over the place. And then, all throughout this episode, Mark's reintegration continues to progress. His identities start to merge more vividly several times during this episode, putting one essentially into the shoes of another. Like, now that I think about it, the merging of Mark's two identities does kind of solve the who raises the baby problem. But anyway, Mark ends up getting a nosebleed just like Petey did in season 1. And he has a moment in which his two identities merge while he's being fixed up by Miss Huang, which was a surprisingly tense moment. Then later, while scarfing down Chinese food at a restaurant, Helena walks into the restaurant, clearly having stalked Mark, but I'm not sure to what end. Mark's in there eating. It's a weird situation because as someone reintegrating, he has to sense that he knows her, right? He has to feel it. He even looks at her strangely as she leaves, but at the same time, the surface level reality is that Audi Mark only knows her as Helena Egan, the head of Lumen or whatever. But she knows his innie quite intimately. So She apologizes to him for the whole overtime contingency situation, but then she mentions Gemma, but calls her Hannah. I can't place why she would do that just yet. Like, let me know what you think in the comments, but that didn't seem like a mistake. Like, it felt very intentional, or maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it could have just been the show's way of showing how Helena Egan will sit there and have a nice conversation with you and pretend to care about you and offer up these apologies. But at the end of the day, she couldn't even be bothered to learn your dead wife's name. But it could be that, but it felt like more than that. Like she did that for a reason. I can't figure out why. So after this encounter, Mark leaves the restaurant and he tells Ragabi to flood his chip to accelerate the process, the reintegration process. She hits him with a numbing agent, splits his wig like that one shot in the opening credits, and injects something into his brain. I feel like she said it was like blood blood that had hemorrhaged or something. I don't know. I kind of lost it. But she floods the chip, and we can even see like the two separate brain waves merge into one on her monitor, which I thought was kind of cool. But Mark needed to settle down after having such a complicated procedure done. That's a real understatement. But Devin arrives and she wants to talk Lumen, but Mark crashes out from trying to walk around and carry conversation after just having fluid injected into his brain. And that's where we end Mark for the episode. Moving on to Irving and Bert. Irving arrives at Bert's house for the orgy that's being masqueraded as a ham dinner. And we meet his husband, Fields, played by John Noble, who I best know from a dope-ass show called Fringe. If you haven't seen it, watch it. Fringe was the shit. We learned there's been some tension in their marriage, like I mentioned at the beginning with the Attila the Hun thing. But we also learned that Bert may have been involved with Lumen longer than the time that Severance has supposedly existed. Like, Irving knows it to have existed for 12 years. But Fields slip up and says that Bert's been involved with it for 20. Now, I'm not going to theorize about that discrepancy or why Bert wanted to shut it down so badly, but I bet that whatever it is, it's likely tied to my question of why Lumen would tell him the truth about what his Innie was getting up to. I was also glad to learn a new reason for someone being severed. So we learned that Bert and Fields feel like Bert wouldn't get into heaven because he's a piece of shit when he was younger. It's probably based off of Christopher Walken's actual life. But that an Innie has a separate soul and thus has a chance of ascending into heaven and they could be together in the afterlife. It's very sweet, very romantic. But I was more glad to find out that people get severed for like positive reasons rather than like, Mark trying to, bury something negative. And this scene ends, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but seemingly with Irving and Bert agreeing to meet behind Fields' back. Like, I think Irving says something like, yeah, we should link up again. And Bert's like, all three of us with Fields? And he's like, yeah. Or either way, like, maybe not. And then Bert gives this look like, okay, I see what you're putting down. I never considered that Bert's Audi could be up to something nefarious, but like, that's very much on the table now, I think. He just seemed like a love interest for Irving in season 1, but the idea that his Audi could not only be up to something, but could also be someone who is either important within Lumen himself or affiliated with someone important. So yeah, color me intrigued. Lastly, we have Dylan, who in a shocking turn of events puts the moves on his own wife. He learns that his Audi has been through a number of phases, just trying to find something he's good at, trying out these different jobs and whatnot. And his wife is like, well, maybe he's not happy. And Dylan's like, bullshit. Like, with a sweet piece of ass like, you at home, why would he not be happy? It's more or less, that's what he said. And then they kiss, which isn't even the most interesting thing that happens. Like, later, when she returns home, Audi Dylan's like, how'd it go? And she lies and says that it had to be canceled. And it's crazy to feel like you have to lie about cheating on your husband with your husband. But aside from that, she says, like, I didn't get to see him, and then corrects herself to say, like, I didn't get to see you. Which I thought was a nice touch, as if to say in her mind, at least instinctively, she views the guy that she was just kissing at Lumen as a different person than the husband that she has at home, even though they're technically the same person. That's all that happens with Dylan this week, but that was a lot. Like, a big turn of events for Dylan, especially when compared to the amount of character advancement that we're getting on the White Lotus right now. But anyway... Oh, I bumped my mic. Anyway, I've said it all season. I'm going to say it again. The ideas and concepts contained within this show are unprecedented. Like, each week, it's so much fun to see what new relationship dynamic they could create with this severed concept. And I thought this episode, It worked, and it was great across the board, just like we've had all season. We've got 4 more left already. It's like, fuck, we're already almost done. But I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty confident these last 4 are going to be great. This season's going to be great. Let me know what you thought about this episode in the comments. Let me know what you think about this season so far in the comments. And until next week, peace.